my horrific driving experience at night in Balete Drive. My name is Jose. I live in the Philippines, and this is the story of my horrifying Grab driving experience. About myself. I recently became a Grab driver, a driver for a sort of ride-hailing service, just like Uber. Since I love to drive, staying up at night, and wanting to earn extra money besides from my regular 9 to 5 job, I thought that Grab was the perfect part-time job for me. Working as a Grab driver at night had its perks. There were always people booking at any time during the graveyard hours, and dropping them off was relatively easy because there was less traffic. But I must admit, there were times in the evening where I would get a little creeped out driving on a quiet night alone. So I would always listen to the FM radio stations that played upbeat music, which would keep me energized, alert, and composed. But there was that one rainy night that had frightened me to the core. It was a couple of days before Halloween, so almost every station had some sort of ghost story being told. Most of the radio stations had invited all sorts of guests like mediums, ghost investigators, people that experienced the supernatural, and a couple of skeptics to be interviewed. Listening to these ghost stories on my car radio had various effects on me. I began thinking that a ghost was sitting at the back seat of my car. I imagined the ghost being a tall, slender man from the 1950s or 60s, wearing a slick black suit and a top hat, sitting down at the middle part at the back seat. I also imagined that his skin was grayish in color, but translucent, like I could see him, yet I could also see right through him. I thought of him staring at me through my rearview mirror, trying to lock eyes with me. And if and when we would lock eyes, that would be his sign that I am aware of his presence. And knowing this fact, I could see him grinning from ear to ear, revealing his distorted, twisted smile as he made his way to me. I would imagine him moving his hideous mouth near my ear, to whisper something that I didn't want to hear. I began to think that he would tell me the answers to the questions I thought about in my head. What are the questions I was too frightened to know, like when I would die, how I would die, or perhaps he would tell me about a fatal accident that someone I cared about would have in the near future. My imaginations continued to run wild in my head. This made my heart beat loudly from my chest. I began to feel a sense of fear and anxiety. So after listening to a few of these ghost stories, I felt that I had to turn my radio off. I then took in a deep breath before exhaling it all. I drove in silence at first, but later started humming some of my favorite songs out loud in hopes to calm my nerves. And thankfully it did. I managed to drive around at night, putting all my imaginations and fears at the back of my mind, focusing myself with my work of picking up and dropping off different passengers around the city. After driving several hours, I found myself in Quezon City, dropping off my latest passenger. But after I dropped him off, things became very slow. I waited for about an hour, but it seemed that there were no longer people booking. I was about to head home at that point, but just when I was about to call it a night, my Grab notification had an alert. I got a booking in Balete Drive. I have heard about this road being haunted or something, but I didn't really know the whole story, only that it had something to do with a white lady. It was about midnight when I arrived at the road. By then, the rain already stopped, but because of it, the roads were a little foggy. Upon entering the road of Balete Drive, I noticed that it was a little dark and very quiet. The road seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness, with no signs of life around. As I weaved through the empty lane, a sudden chill crept up my spine, sending shivers down my arms, and the balete trees that grew there added to the eerie atmosphere of the place. As I drove along the road, I observed the trees. They were massive in size, with their sprawling roots and branches creating a dense and dark canopy. Their thick foliage blocked out most of the street lights, creating a dark and gloomy atmosphere around it. The roots of these balete trees appeared twisted and contorted, giving it a grotesque and unnatural appearance. Their abnormal shapes looked like faces or human-like silhouettes in the dark. These evoked feelings of fear and unease in me. At last, I stopped at the pinned location where my passenger booked, but only to find that they weren't there. I made sure to stay inside my car as I waited, just staring out from my car's window, squinting at the spooky empty road in hopes to find where my passenger was. All I could see was that it was dark, and that the place where I parked had the most congested density of Balete trees. As I anxiously waited, I decided to message my passenger. I typed in the standard message off. "Hi, I am here." To which I noticed that my passenger had seen and had read my message just as soon as I sent it. It took another couple of minutes for when my passenger finally replied back, saying, "Wait." And with that, I waited a bit longer, but I was already a little frustrated. I seriously thought about canceling this ride, but I thought to myself that I wanted to keep my good reputation and 5-star rating, knowing that if I would cancel this ride, it would affect my score. As I continued to wait, I began to have a sudden urge to urinate. I didn't realize that my bladder was full. If it was not for the pain that came from my lower abdomen, I wouldn't have noticed that I needed to pee. As I looked outside my car, seeing the empty street surrounded by darkness, I seriously just wanted to pee into an empty bottle, rather than go outside of my car. But since I had no such bottle, I thought to myself to brave it out and pee outside, and maybe worry about the repercussions of my action later. Before I left my car, I made sure that I turned my high beams on to brighten my surroundings and to light up the part where I set myself to go to. As I went outside, the chilly air made my body shiver, sending a wave of unease through my body. The dimly flickering streetlights casted long, ominous shadows that seemed to dance and twist in the cold, silent air. "Come on, Jose. Just piss behind one of the trees that the car is beaming at, and return to the car," I told myself. As I walked towards the trees, I was really creeped out. My heart was racing and my hands were cold as ice. I had to cross my arms as I walked, in hopes of warming them, and to give myself some sort of comfort. I was begging to hear some familiar sounds of life to break the ghastly silence of the night. I was hoping to hear drunk people talk loudly from a corner, or to hear people singing karaoke from a distance, or even just to hear a dog bark to distract my crazy imaginations trying to enter my mind. But unfortunately, luck was not by my side. The only sounds I heard was just the distant echo of my own footsteps as I walked. As I made my way behind one of the Balete trees, I began to relieve myself. As I did so, I began to look at all directions, especially my back. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That unseen eyes are following my every move from the shadows. I felt like someone or something could just pop out of nowhere. I began having goosebumps that ran through my back and all the way to the back of my neck. I put pressure on my bladder in hopes to quicken the process and to end my vulnerable position. After I was done doing my business, I had a few seconds of physical relief before my imaginations started to run wild in my head. "There's a ghost," is what my mind was saying. I wanted to run like a sissy back to my car, but I thought to myself to be a man. "Jose, you're a grown-ass man. Stuff like this shouldn't creep you out," I said to myself out loud as I walked slowly towards my car. I kept repeating those same words in hopes it would give me some sort of courage, which thankfully, after the nth time, it did. As I approached my car, I realized that my car's high beams heat seemed to have caused a reaction in the outside temperature, producing a sort of mist to surround the front part of my car. And as I looked closely inside my car, my eyes widened at what I saw. I thought and could have sworn I saw a lady in white, sitting at my car's back seat. "No freaking way," I said to myself. I rubbed my eyes to adjust my vision. But as soon as I looked back to where I saw the woman, she was gone. I tried to convince myself that it was just a trick of the light. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. At that point, I was already yelling out bloody murder, sputtering out all the cuss words I knew. I was hesitant to approach my car because of what I thought I saw. But then again, what other options did I have? Staying here outside seemed to be even worse. But my car was supposed to be my safe zone, my protection. But now it seemed like a place where all sorts of crazy stuff would happen. I began to take in a deep breath. I mustered all my courage, and like a madman, I dashed to my car, ready to yell out to who or whatever thing was inside. But as I entered my car, no one was there. I didn't know what to feel. Relief that nothing is in my car, or fear that what I saw could still be inside, just that I couldn't see it. I began talking loudly to myself to distract my mind from thinking of something terrifying and to keep my emotions in check. Okay, Jose, put on your seatbelt. Adjust your car's front lights. Turn off the radio. Radio? My heart began to beat faster and stronger after remembering that my radio was off during the duration of my drive. And to make it worse, the interview on the radio was about Balete Drive. The speaker talked about a white lady that awaits for an unsuspecting taxi to ride in. I only heard a few bits of it before turning the radio off. My hands were shivering, but I had to focus on my driving. I just needed to get out of this street, and then I am home free. During my panic state, I didn't realize that all of my windows were fogged up because of the cold and rain earlier. I began to use my wiper on my front and back window. However, it seemed that I would need to clean my right and left side mirrors manually. I began to get misty-eyed because of all of what was going on. I wanted this whole ordeal to be over, but I knew that I needed to do more in order for me to get out of here. And so, I took in a deep breath before going outside again to clean my side car mirrors. With the bottom part of my shirt, I began to wipe my mirrors, while looking around frantically, fearing to see something supernatural. As I wiped my mirrors, I began to pray out loud to ward off bad spirits. I don't know if it had any effect on ghosts, but it did help calm my nerves. But as I went back inside my car, I felt that the temperature had dropped. It was odd and bizarre. I felt icy cold, and I noticed that I could see my breath whenever I exhaled through my mouth. So with that, I immediately turned my AC off in hopes of getting some heat back in my car. But it didn't really do anything. I was scared, terrified about my current situation, and I felt helpless. Even with all the weird anomalies happening inside my car, I knew that I needed to move. And so I did. I began to step on the accelerator pedal ever so lightly, and the car began to move slowly forward. As my car gained momentum, my seat belt's warning light began to flicker, and the car made some sort of noise, notifying me to put my seatbelt on. And so I did, only to find out that it had no effect. I took my seatbelts off and placed it back on, but still my seatbelt's warning light continued to flicker. Is something riding with me? I thought to myself. I tried to ignore it, but the fear of realizing that something was in my car gnawed at my sanity. Again, I could feel my racing heart beat throughout my body. I began to speed up, as I knew that just about 300 meters, I could make a right turn to get me out of this street. As I began to see where I could turn from the far distance, for whatever reason, I took a peep at my rearview mirror, and there she was. The thing that I dreaded to see was staring right back at me. I only took a quick glance, but her ethereal presence filled the car with a chilling aura, making the air thick with tension. Stupidly, I looked at my rearview mirror again, to confirm to myself that I wasn't imagining her. She began to grin at me, and twist her head to the side as she slowly tried to inch closer to me. I thought I could see her head peeking out from my side, based on my peripheral vision. And as soon as I turned my head ever so slightly to look at her, she produced a horrific, gut-wrenching scream. And then she vanished into thin air as soon as I turned the corner to the other street. I began to sob while I drove away, grateful that I survived the whole ordeal. I stopped at a fast food restaurant, where I saw a couple of people eating through the glass window. Finally, signs of life. I began to breathe a sigh of relief. After a few minutes, I started checking on my phone to see my Grab app, only to find that I had no record of the passenger that I was supposed to pick up in Balete Drive. My story might sound quite extreme, but believe me, it's true. I was at that road, and the ghost of the lady in white was there with me. If you think you want to experience and witness the ghost of the lady in white for yourself, be my guest. It is said that she will never appear if you have a group of people with you. She'll only come out when you are alone and vulnerable, during the graveyard hours of the night, starting from midnight onwards. As for myself, after that horrifying experience, I vowed never to drive there at night, ever again. What do you think about the story? Do you want more creepy, chilling horror stories? If so, please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Night Owl's Midnight Stories, so I can grow my brand and in return provide you with more horror stories. Thank you, fellow night owls, and may you have a good night's rest.